Hi, everyone. So, you have immigration questions, and I have answers for you today. A lot of you have been sending me questions, or these questions came from consultations I have had that people just have the same questions, and I want to answer those for you. If you're joining me live and you have questions, please go ahead and put them in the comments so that I can respond to you. And just so you know, I am U.S. immigration attorney Lillian Chukura, and I help my clients get green cards and citizenships for themselves and their families using the U.S. immigration law system. If you are joining me live, please say hi in the comments. I am just so happy to be here with you all. Hi, Wilma. Welcome. Thanks for joining me. Remember, if you have questions, put them in the comments. This live is just to answer your questions. It is just Q&A time. Okay, it is your time to ask me questions. And like I said, I did get questions from consultations, from people asking me questions before this. So I will be responding to those live. But if you're joining me and you have questions, put them in the comments. If you're watching this on the replay and you have questions, go ahead and put them in the comments. Hi. All right. So, first thing first, let's talk about the biggest questions people have been asking me, which is about the fee change on April 1st, how that affects their process, right? If you're trying to figure out, whether you should rush your application and file it before April 1st or wait and file it later. Well, the biggest thing you need to know is depending on what type of form you're filing, the fees are going to go up. So if you're filing a green card application based on marriage or based on being the parent or child of a US citizen, um, wow, the fee for the I-485, the I-535, all of those are going up for you, okay? So the fee for the I-535 is going up. You need that form. I'm sorry, the I-130. The I-130 and the I-485, those two are going up. Those two are going up. And you just need to know that. And then you can decide, right? You can decide if you want to wait or if you want to file ahead of time, right? Before April 1st. Here's how you can decide this. If you know that you want to include a travel permit, if you know you want to include a work permit with your application, you may want to file before April 1st because those forms are now going to have a fee. So if you file before April 1st, the fee for the work permit and the travel permit is $0 as long as you file it with the I-485, the green card application. The fee is $0. If you file it April 1st and after, now you have a fee for each of those forms. So the I-765 and the I-131 are now going to have a fee moving forward. But if you're filing it with your green card application, the I-765, the work permit, is now going to be half price. So before the fee was included with the green card application, now you get half off. But with the travel permit, there's no half off. You're going to have to pay the full thing. So if you want to include all of the forms, you're basically going from paying $1,760 for all four forms to paying $3,005. So that is a huge increase, especially if you are filing for multiple family members now, right? That's a lot of money to put out. So you want to make sure that if you are already in the process to start that going, okay? So before April 1st, the I-765 and the I-131 are free. After April 1st, there's now a fee for them, okay? If you are filing based on VAWA, though, right? If you're filing a green card application based on VAWA, based on U visa, based on T visa, guess what? The green card application fee is $0 starting April 1st. If you file before April 1st, right? If you file this week or next week, you're going to have to pay the green card application fee of 1,225. But if you wait till April 1st and file your VAWA application with your green card application, with your work permit, with your travel permit, everything is free. You don't have to pay for anything. So before, what we used to do is file a fee waiver for our VAWA clients. But now they don't have to worry about any filing fees as part of their VAWA application starting on April 1st. So that's a huge, huge deal, because typically people going through the VAWA process have suffered abuse. They are not in the best financial situation to be paying for anything. They may have been living in a shelter because they're running away from their abuser. In those situations, now USCIS is saying you don't have to pay any fees. We'll take care of the fees for the green card application, the work permit, the travel permit, and if you need a waiver, they will also pay. They will also waive the fee for the waiver. So any application you file that's in connection with your VAWA application, your U visa application, and your T visa application is now waived. And if you have derivatives, meaning you have family members, children under you that will get status because you're getting status through VAWA, U, or T visa, they also get the benefit of having the fees waived. So that is the big news out of that. So if you're in that situation and you are worried about filing for VAWA because you don't know where you're going to get the money to pay for the filing fees, well, you don't have to. You just have to wait till April 1st to file. All right. So I see a question from Wilma. Hi there. My kids' case have been sent to MVC. Can I get a divorce before the kids' interview? It depends, I guess. It depends on what the relationship between the kids and the spouse that you will be divorcing is, right? Let's say you are the stepmother filing for your spouse's children. Will that cause issues? No, but you have to show that you're maintaining that relationship with the children. If the children are your biological children, just know there may be a question of if you're still a permanent resident, of whether the marriage was real and it just ended in divorce. So it's really good to understand how that may affect the case, but without knowing more about the situation, I can just give you general information on that. So if they are your stepchildren, you just have to show that you're maintaining that step parent stepchild relationship. If they are your biological children and your spouse's biological children, it may not have any effect. If they are not your spouse's biological children, but your biological children, the question may come up of whether the marriage, if you got your green card through the marriage and you're not a citizen yet, that's where that will come up. But if you're already a citizen, USCIS does not really go into detail on parent-child applications. Okay. So remember, if you have questions, please go ahead and put them in the comments. All right. Next question I have here is, what are some requirements needed if you desire to travel outside the US for a month when you have extensions for the 8 months? So this is typically when you apply to either renew your green card or to remove conditions on your green card. What you need in order to travel in these situations is, once you file for that renewal or to remove conditions, USCIS is going to send you an original receipt notice that's typically green, and you need to travel with that original receipt notice and your expired card. All right. If your card is lost, right? It's not just that it expired, but you don't know where it is. You need to contact USCIS and get an ADIT stamp, because the only way you can get on a flight from outside of the US to the US when your green card has expired is if you have the expired green card and the original receipt notice. So the green receipt notice with the card gets you back into the US. If you lose the card, then you want to make sure that you are getting that ADIT stamp before you leave the US. If you're outside of the US already, you traveled with your receipt notice and your expired card, and you unfortunately lose the card outside of the US, you need to immediately contact the embassy for something called a boarding foil. That's the only way you'll be able to board a plane back to the US. Okay. A boarding foil is basically something they put in your passport that allows you to get on a flight and be able to prove that you are still a permanent resident. All right. So those are the ways and procedure. As long as you have the expired card with the receipt notice that's green, you're fine to travel. If you've lost either of those two things, you need to contact USCIS and get an ADIT stamp. If you're outside of the US and you lost either of those things, you need to contact the embassy and get a boarding foil. All right. So remember, if you're joining me and you have questions, go ahead and put them in the comments. All right. So next question. Should I put the receipt number when changing address? Is it okay if if I don't put the receipt number? So if you're doing a change of address online on the USCIS website, if you're doing a change of address, you have to put the receipt number. It's not going to let you do that unless you don't have a case pending, right? If you are a permanent resident, and remember, permanent residents have to update their address with USCIS within 10 days of moving. So if that's the reason that you're updating your address, you don't need a receipt number. You just have to check the box that says that you don't have a case pending. However, if you have a case pending and you're doing your change of address online, you need to put the receipt number just so that they update every single form that you have pending. And it lets you put multiple receipt numbers in there. All right. And then if you're doing the paper AR11 does not have a space for receipt number, so you put your A number. So, but if you're doing it online, you have to put that receipt number. It's just the best to make sure that every single form that you have pending is actually being updated. All right. Great question. What are the requirements for B2 visa holder need to meet to be able to adjust its status to study or work? All right. So those are two different things. So study has its own requirement, work has its own requirement. So I'll take those one at a time. For study, you need to show that you have received admission to a school and the school has to give you an I-20. Okay, that's the first step. Before you even get to a change of status, to study to the student visa, the F1 visa, you want to apply to the school, get admission, get the I-20. Typically, most schools will want you to show that you have the financial ability to pay for the school before they will issue you an I-20. Okay, so that's the first step. Once you meet all their requirements and they issue you the admission and the I-20, you can now apply for a change of status. Your B2 status needs to be valid. Okay, if you want the smoothest process from visit to student, your visit needs to still be valid. So if you came in and they gave you 6 months, you need to apply for the change of status before the 6 months is up. USCIS is now giving an exception for people that were not able to file within their stay because of extraordinary circumstances beyond their control. All right. They didn't give the definition of what extraordinary circumstances are, but I can tell you most of the time it's typically medical conditions, things that are typically beyond your control, not just that you forgot. Okay. So that's number one. Get your I-20, apply to USCIS. Applying to USCIS, you're filing Form I-539 with your I-20 with proof that you are still within your status and proof that you can financially pay for the school. So it's either you are financially paying for the school or you have a sponsor that's willing to pay for the school for you. If you have a sponsor and that sponsor is not an immediate family member, so it's not your parents or your siblings, there needs to be, this is what I typically recommend, a letter included to show why someone else that's not your parents, that's not your siblings, are willing to pay for the school, because typically we are talking thousands of dollars, right? Why the person is willing to pay thousands of dollars for you to go to school. All right. And you need to show that the person has the funds ready to go, right? Not that, they make enough income. No, that's not what the requirement is. They have the funds to pay for your first year of school in their account, in their investments, whatever it is. It needs to be something that they can actually withdraw. You can't just show, oh, well, they have properties. Great that they have properties. Are they going to sell the properties within a month to pay for your school? No. Okay. So they need to actually have the money in their account. All right. And if you're doing the bank statements to show, you should also give months of bank statements, not just 1 month of bank statements. Like, don't just put money into an account just to meet the requirements, because USCIS is hip to that. They know that people will do that, so they pay attention. So you file your application, and then USCIS can get back to you and let you know if it's been approved or not. You can also, if you're close to your B2 ending, you can also apply. Also include a premium processing. So the premium processing, you can typically get a response within 2 weeks. So you know exactly where you are, and you don't have to overstay. That's another beauty of it. You don't overstay because you did the premium process and you found out in 2 weeks that yes or no. And if it's no, you were able to leave the US before you got any unlawful presence. Okay. For the work, you need an employer to hire you. Okay. For the school has to give you admission. For the work has to hire you and be willing to file an application for you, either a change of status to a temporary work visa, or an adjustment of status to a more permanent green card. All right. So that's the first step. You need to get the work. The only people that don't need an employer are people with extraordinary ability, meaning you are the top of your field. All right. If you can show that you are the top of the top, you most of the time are able to apply on your own without an employer. But for the majority of people, you need an employer. So that's the first step. Have an employer that's willing to file for you. The employer will start the process for you. So it's not, if you're doing an employment base, a work visa, unless you qualify to file on your own, the employer is the one taking the lead, is the one engaging with the lawyer to get everything filed for you. Okay. H-1B season just ended. So typically that's the process people go through, the H-1B. If they get selected for the lottery, then they start the visa process. But That's that's the process for work. We do mostly family based and student, not really work in my office. So I'm able to tell you more about the study than the work. Um, but that is the general things to know about that. All right. If you have questions, remember, put them in the comments. All right. I see one from Instagram. My wife is a green card holder. She just filed for citizenship and had to put me on there as an overstay. Am I safe? Well, if she didn't put you on there, she cannot then file for you once she gets her green card, once she gets her citizenship. Okay. Um, the fact that you're on the application, there's always a risk, but the risk is higher if you have any negative interaction with the police or if you accidentally cross the border, right? But if you are generally not engaging in any way with the police or border states, typically USCIS is not going to take actions based on your wife's application, but they do know that once your wife becomes a citizen, you would now, as an overstay, qualify for your wife to file for you. So most of the time in those situations, they may not take any action. Again, a lot of it depends on um, the individual and what their situation is. But generally, your wife filing an application for her citizenship would not typically affect you. But if she does not include you in that citizenship application, it will definitely affect her ability to file for you. Okay. So if that's the goal, is for your wife to file for you once she becomes a citizen, she has to include you in the application, or you are going to end up not getting your green card through her. Okay. So you did the right thing. If that's your question, you did the right thing. Um, all right. If you have questions and you're joining me, put them in the comments. I am answering your US immigration questions today. All right. So someone else, this is a great question. We're waiting approval of the I-130. Should I apply for something else now to reduce the cost? Well, this is going to depend on whether the person is in the US or not. If the person is in the US, then there may be ways for you to reduce costs before April 1st. If the person is not in the US and you already have the I-130 pending, there's really nothing you can do to reduce costs because guess what? USCIS and the embassy are completely separate departments of the government. So USCIS is under Department of Homeland Security and the embassies are under Department of State. So their fees are different. Okay, they do not um, communicate as far as fees. Each department has their own fees. So the fact that the USCIS fees are going up April 1st does not also mean that the embassy fees are going up April 1st. Those are two separate things. Um, so there's nothing you can do in that situation. However, if the person is in the US and they came in with authorization, right? They came in with a visa, they came in with parole, and their parole qualifies them for adjustment of status, they should be applying for their green card, the work permit, the travel permit um, now so that they can save that cost after April 1st. Okay. If they came in without authorization, there's really nothing you can do because you have to wait for the I-130 to be approved before you can do anything else like filing for a waiver or anything like that. All right. And remember, if you're joining me and you have questions, Put them in the comments. All right. If the child is over 21, can the step parent still petition for the child? Um, the marriage was before the child had turned 18. Great question. Great question. Yes. So once you meet the requirement as a step parent or step child for US immigration purposes, which is the step parent and the biological parents getting married before the child turns 18. That's it. That's what creates the step parent step child relationship for US immigration purposes. So once you meet that requirement, you have that for life. Okay. It doesn't just go away once the child turns 21. You just have to show that you met that requirement before the child turned 18. So once you're able to show that, you are still their stepchild there, and you are still their step parent. Okay. So even if the child is over 21, you can still file for them just like they were your biological children. The only time that this kind of changes is if, for example, you get divorced from the biological parent. You just have to show that you maintain that relationship with the stepchild, okay, in order to be able to file for them. But their age at the time of filing does not matter. It's their age at the time of marriage, okay? At the time you married their parents, how old were they? If they were less than 18 years old, even if it's a day less than 18, they qualify as your stepchild. You qualify as your step parent for immigration purposes. And remember, this goes both ways. The step parent can file for the stepchild, and the stepchild can file for the step parent once they turn 21. So sometimes people do not know that. So that was a great question. All right. Next question. Can I file my stepchild's petition in the same document with my spouse adjustment of status? No. This is always a great question because people want to think that if you are filing for your spouse and they have children, you can just include the children in their application, and that also includes the, everything. Everyone just gets a green card at the end. Unfortunately, if you are a US citizen, each person needs their own application. So your spouse needs their own application, your stepchildren need their own application. You cannot combine those. Okay, so each person gets their own I-130, each person gets their own I-485, their own work permit, their own travel permit, anything else you want to include, their own affidavit of support. Okay, every single person gets their own individual form. Now, if you're a green card holder and your spouse is outside of the US and you're filing for your spouse, guess what? You don't have to file a separate petition for your stepchildren. Okay. The only time you have to file a separate petition for the stepchildren that are under 21 is if you are a US citizen. But if you are a permanent resident, they can be included in your spouse's I-130. But then when you get to the embassy stage, each person will need their own visa application. Okay. So I hope that answered that question. I see a question here. Can you please share more tips on marriage, green card, interview questions, and preparation? Great question. I will tell you this. I have multiple videos on my YouTube channel at Lily Legal, okay, youtube.com/Lily Legal, where you can actually watch multiple videos where I talk about interview tips, prep, questions, everything, okay? But let's talk about it some more. Because this is like I said in my recent video, this is a place where people really get nervous and not sure what to expect. So let's talk about it some more. When it comes to your interview, you need to be prepared. Okay, you need to have all your documents, original documents. So anything you send to USCIS, you need to have the original of it. So for example, if you're sending You sent in your birth certificate, you need to have your original birth certificate for the interview. Your marriage certificate, original for the interview. Because some officers may not want to see it, while other ones want to see it. So you want to make sure that you have those originals. And if you look at your interview notice, it tells you to bring the originals. Just because you get to your interview and the officer doesn't ask for the originals, does not mean you shouldn't have taken it with you. It just means the officer did not want to see it. Okay. You don't want to be in a position where you get to your interview and you get that one officer that wants to see every single original document that you sent in. All right. You don't want that. So be prepared ahead of time. Have all your documents. If you send in bank statements, if you send in tax returns, update all of those. Okay. Update your bank statements from the time you filed to when you have your interview, so that the officer can see that you're still using your bank account, that you're still presenting yourself as a married couple and sharing your expenses and income. All right. And then, as far as the interview itself, you and your spouse need to be on the same page about a few things. One being, how did you meet? Where did you meet? When did you meet? Where did you go on your first date? When did you go on your first date? Who proposed? When did they propose? When did you get married? You know, who was at the wedding? Where was the wedding? Did you go on a honeymoon? If you did, where, when? Right? A lot of the question is when, where, what, how, how many people were there? Who do you live with? How many people live in your residence? You need to know these things for your marriage-based interview, because the officer, when they're asking you about your home, they are trying to gauge whether you actually live in that home. Okay. That's why they're asking you those questions. They're not asking you to be intrusive. They want to gauge, how much do you actually know about this home that you say you live in? So pay attention to your home if you have not been paying attention. Okay. I have had officers ask what colors at the wall, what type of window coverings are in the living room, right? Is it blinds? If it is it curtains? Is it, what is it? I've had that. And then one of the harder questions I've had officers ask is, imagine my office is your bedroom. Tell me where everything will be. Like, most people just look at the officer confused, but I've had this happen like twice now, where the officer asks, imagine my office is your bedroom, and the door to the office is where your door is. Where is everything else? And they draw it out. As you're talking, you're like, okay, there's two windows on the left wall. From the door, there's a dresser right next to the wall, next to the door. There's the bed on this wall. The officer is busy drawing it out. And then when your spouse comes in and they ask, they ask them the same question, they're looking to make sure that you two are putting everything on the same wall, that the bed is where you say it is. If you say that there's dressers, that they're in the same position. If you say there's a window, they're in the same position, right? All of those things, it seems little, right? But it does matter. So take a walk around your home and really understand where things are, right? If you're not a person that cooks, please go check what type of stove you have. Is it gas or electric? Because I've had officers ask that. All right. If you have your trash picked up, what day of the month? What day does the trash people come to pick up your trash? Right. These are questions I've had officers ask. I'm not making this up. This is just what I have heard and witnessed. Officers ask my clients. So you want to be ready for these questions. Where does your spouse work? How long have they worked there? What's their work schedule? And then if you walk in there and you say that their work schedule changes every week, the officer may then ask you, what was their work schedule last week? If you're in the interview on a Friday, they may ask you what was their work schedule this week, right? So far in the week, how many days have they worked? What days? What hours? What time do they get home from work? Right? How much do you pay for rent? If you have a sibling living with you and your spouse, do they contribute to the rent? Right? How do you split your utilities with the roommate? Whether it's your sibling, whether it's, you know, someone that's not related to you, the officer wants to know these things, right? So when you are preparing, you want to be preparing for all of that. And like I said, I do have a video where I go through interview questions. All right. I also offer a mock interview process. So if people are interested in a mock interview where I will basically pretend to be the officer and ask you questions as if I'm the officer, and then give you your results at the end, you can also schedule a strategy session with me just so we can figure out if that's the best thing for you and then move forward from there. But yeah, we do mock interviews with my clients, and we offer mock interviews for people that are going on their own and just want that extra preparation before they get there. But yeah, if you have additional questions, please go ahead and put them in the comments. And if you want to schedule a strategy session to talk about maybe doing a mock interview or getting help with your green card process, your citizenship process, you can go to my website, lilylegal.com, or call my office at 508-443-1788 just to schedule that strategy session and get you on the right track to your green card. All right. So if you have any other questions, please put them in the comments. Those were all the questions I had ahead of time. And I am more than happy to respond. So go ahead. You have me here until I don't see any questions. Okay. Um, Okay, how will you prepare your marriage-based green card application to not be called for interviews, the necessary documents to present? Thank you. All right, so I do have, I'm just going to be directing y'all to the videos that I already have. I do have a video that will give you all the tips and tricks to get you basically try to get you not to have an interview. All right. Just because you include everything I said does not mean an officer will not schedule you for an interview. All right. That's just something to keep in mind. So as you are prepare your application so that the officer can basically check every single box that they have. So do you live together? Do you present yourself as married couple? Do you have joint financial responsibility? Do you put your money together? Do you tell the world that this person is your spouse? Do you communicate with each other? Right? You want to be checking off those boxes. So that's on the I-130. So I know when people talk about marriage-based green card, they focus more on the green card, but when it comes to your actual marriage, like questions about your marriage and all of that, that's the I-130. Okay, that's where the officer makes that decision of whether your marriage is real or not. So you want to make sure that you have documentation meeting all those requirements. So joint residence is a huge one, showing that you and your spouse live together. So that can be lease, that can be bills in both names, right? The bills also goes to financial responsibilities, right? Bank statements shows joint financial assets and financial responsibilities, because then you can use your joint bank account to show that you're paying your bills together, right? You can have a portion of your income go into your joint bank account to pay those expenses. So you want to make sure that you are including as much as possible. Okay. If you are just including pictures, that's not going to be enough. Okay. So pictures are great. Visual aids are good. But joint taxes, joint bank statements, joint lease, mortgage, all of that is more important if you have children together, including the birth certificate for the kids in your application. That is what's going to get you a higher chance of not having an interview. All right. Showing that the non US citizen meets the requirements for a green card, right? That they came in with some form of either a visa or parole, and that their visa qualifies them to adjust status. There are some visas, like a C1 visa, will not allow you to adjust your status in the US. So it's really important that you make sure that you're showing that your visa qualifies you to adjust status. That you entered on that visa, that you are including either the visa stamp when you came in or your I-94 to show that, again, you meet the requirements. If you've ever had any criminal history, you are most likely not having your interview waived. Sorry to be a bearer of bad news. If there's ever been an issue with you, applying for a visa, being denied, and then applying again and being approved, things like that, you're most likely going to have an interview. If this is your second time applying with a different spouse, you're most likely going to have an interview. But if this is your first time ever applying and every time you apply for a visa, you got approved, you have a better chance. And then part of your process, you want to include your medical exam report, because that way, if they do want to approve your case without an interview, they can just have everything they need, right? Typically, they will send you a request for evidence for the medical exam, but if you send it in ahead of time, you are you're able to get that waived. And Isaac says, we included everything and still got called. That's typical, honestly. So most people are going to have an interview. And I know like everyone wants their interview to be waived, but that is not typical. Okay? That is not typical. Most people, the majority of people are going to have an interview. Only a few people don't have interviews. So it's something that people always, want to talk about and hope for, right? It's a good thing to hope for, but just know, in a typical marriage-based green card process, you are going to have an interview. And the shorter your marriage is, even more likely you're going to have an interview. Okay, so let's say you just got married and you filed within a month or so of that marriage. The officer, you're not going to have a lot of documentation together. So the officer is most likely going to schedule you for an interview. All right. So it's about the not about the quantity, but the quality of the evidence that you're sending in, and whether the officer still has questions after looking at your documents. All right. That's really the key there. Does the officer feel like they have everything they need to just go ahead and approve your case without questions? If they feel like they still have questions, they're going to schedule you for an interview. So, like I said, most people are going to have interviews. Most of my clients get interviews. Okay. It's perfectly normal. And I think, once USCIS started saying that once they were given, the officers were given the authority to waive interviews, people really started thinking that that's going to be more widespread, but it's not. Okay. It is not, but it all comes down to documentation, your immigration history, and your criminal history. Okay. Depending on what's in your background, your spouse's background is what's going to determine if the officer feels they have enough or not. All right. Next question. Can we present a bank statements of 3 to 4 months when submitting our green card application? Thank you. I say if you have a joint bank account, you should be including all your statements. So if the bank account has been open for 3 to 4 months, then you should be including 3 to 4 months of bank statements. The officer doesn't just want to know that you have a joint account. They want to see that you are consistently using the joint account. So if you only give them one statement, it only tells them that for that month, you use the joint account. But if you have been using the joint account for a year, you should include a year's worth of bank statements. And what we do also in some of those is if both of your income is going into that account, we are highlighting, okay, if your mortgage, your rent is coming out of that account, you highlight that, okay? That's what we do. We make it as clear as possible and as easy as possible for the officer to basically see what they need and be able to approve the case, right? Yes, you want your interview to be waived, but the focus should not be on having your interview waived. It should be on having your marriage believed, right? Don't focus on having your interview waived, because having an interview does not mean that the officer doesn't believe in your marriage. Having an interview does not mean the officer does not believe in your marriage. I'll give you an example. We just recently had an interview. The bulk of the interview was about the client's asylum application, right? They filed for asylum before they got married and applied for a green card through the marriage. So it's not that the officer doesn't believe your relationship, is that there may be something in your immigration file that the officer has questions about, and that's where they are needing to talk to you to just make sure that everything they have there makes sense, right? You've had people send you documents or send you a text or whatever, and you're just like, I don't know if this is what I think it is, or if there's something else going on here. And then you talk to the person and you're like, oh, now I get it. Now I understand why that said what it said, and that's why things are the way they are, right? So just think about it that way. Most officers are going to schedule people for interviews because they want to hear you say on the oath that this marriage is real, and that, ask you all sorts of questions on the oath. Okay. So that's really what it's about. It's not, so when you do have an interview scheduled, just know it's not a question of whether your marriage is real. Okay. Most of the time, that's not the question. Some of the times it is. Okay. Some of the times the officer did some quick research and found some negative things, and now wants to meet with you and your spouse to just find out if the negative things are actually negative, or if there's a perfectly reasonable explanation for it. Okay. So the interview is an opportunity for you. Okay. It's an opportunity for you to show the officer through your answers, through your interactions, that your marriage is real. And that starts from when you walk in the door. All right. Not when the officer calls you into their office, but when you walk into the USCIS building, that's when the whole thing starts. Because you don't know who's watching you at all times. So from the time you walk into the door, actually drive into the parking lot, to the time you leave that parking lot, just assume that you are being watched. Okay. So all your interactions are being watched. That's what I tell my clients. So it's okay. um, but yeah, if you have questions, put them in the comments. We kind of got in a little um, string of questions about interviews. So if you have questions, put them in the comments. And just to reiterate, If you have bank statements, include as many of it as possible and make it as clear to the officer as possible, what the expenses are on those bank statements. And if you are scheduled for an interview and you know you included bank statements, please know what the transactions are on your bank statements. Because let's say, one spouse spent $1,000 on something, and the officer asks you, what was this $1,000 for? And you're sitting there saying you don't know. That's a problem, because if it's a joint account, it's reasonable to believe that you two use the account. So both of you should know what's going through the account, especially if it's $1,000 or more, right? A significant amount of money leaving your account, you should know what that is. So again, it's not just about having a bank account. It is not just about having a bank account. You have to use it, and you have to know what's going through it. All right. Okay. So if you have any additional questions, please go ahead and put them in the comments. But like I said, if I do not see questions, I'm going to assume that I have answered all your questions, or at least the questions that you have for today. Just so you know, there will be no live next week, Friday, because my kids are off of school and I will be on full mommy duty next Friday. So that's why we are doing this Q&A session this week instead of the last Friday of the month. So if you have additional questions, go ahead, feel free to put them in the comments. And you can always ask me questions, either DM the questions or put it under a YouTube video so that I know you have those questions and I can address them on the next Q&A. Or depending on what your question is, I may do a whole video discussing it, because I do that sometimes. Because these videos are to give you answers to your questions. So sometimes you have questions and I'm happy to respond and do a whole video breaking it down for you. If you are interested in getting legal help from me with your green card, citizenship, applications, anything of that sort, you can do so by going to my website, lilylegal.com, or calling my office at 508-443-1788 to schedule a strategy session where we'll talk about if you qualify, how you qualify, what type of documents to include, and all of that. All right. So if you're interested in that, remember you can go to my website, lilylegal.com, and then click contact us, and you can schedule it right there. Ooh, okay. So before I go, one question just came in. How likely are immigration to approve a visiting visa for someone to attend a graduation? It depends. So whose graduation is it? So if it's like, I want to attend a friend's graduation, the officer may not be fully on board with that. But let's say that you want to attend, a parent wants to attend their child's graduation, and the child is here on a student visa, and the parent had paid for the student visa, paid for the school, paid for everything, and now this is the culmination of all of that. That's a different situation. If it's a first cousin, it depends on that cousin's qualifications, because the officer's not really, your reason for coming to the US is less important than your qualifications for the visiting visa. So you need to show that you have strong ties to your home country. So you're coming here temporarily. You are only going to stay for like a month or two, and you are going back home, because you literally cannot stay in the US because you have so much going on for you. You have people relying on you. You have work, right? You have to get a leave of absence from your job just to attend this, and you would lose your job if you don't stay, right? Things like that. Or you're running a business and you have employees. You need to show that you have so much going on for you that you have no intentions of leaving it all behind. that's when you can get a B2 visa. um, and those are getting harder and harder to get depending where you're from. So depending on the country you're from, it may be much harder than other places. So think about you as the person applying, not really your reason for coming here. Because some people come to go to Disney World, right? They don't know anyone in the US. They just want to go to Disney World. That's fine. That's fine. You can go to Disney World. But the key to them getting that visiting visa is showing that they have so much going on. They're running companies. They have all their, they have their wife and kids waiting for them. They have all these responsibilities that they can't just leave it behind. And then if they've ever had, let's say they had a family member that overstayed. So let's say you're trying to get a visiting visa to the US, but your brother overstayed. You're going to have a very tough time getting that visa, unless, of course, you can show a lot of ties. All right. So that is, and you're very welcome. I'm glad I was able to answer that question and clarify that, because that does make a huge difference for people, just flipping that thinking of, oh, let me get an invitation. The invitation only does so much. If the person that you're giving the invitation to does not qualify for the visa, the invitation doesn't matter. So if it's like a 21-year-old that's still in school, doesn't have anything going on, the family doesn't have a lot going on, it's going to be very hard to get that visa. So focus more on the person getting the visa, not really the reason they're coming here or that invitation. Okay. All right. Thank you all so much for joining me. I am immigration attorney Lillian Chukura. And if you found this video helpful, hit the like button for me. I forgot to say that. But just let me know that you found this video helpful, and watch my other videos on YouTube, because I do have a new video that comes out every single Tuesday. And most Fridays, we do a live where I'm either teaching you something or I'm answering your questions. So be sure to join me on that. Bye.